The war in Ukraine may not be getting the headlines it did 2 months ago, but the conflict still rages on. The Russian invasion of this war-torn country has left many dead and wounded and countless homeless. Left with no choice but to leave their homeland, millions of refugees have fled to other countries with nothing but their shirts on their backs. One local pastor, who was a native of neighboring Poland, decided he was going to try to help these people any way he could.
My family, my parents still live in Poland. And so when the war began, a lot of my friends and family members were quite active. And, you know, they said just the amount of refugees that poured into Poland, I think out of 6 million Ukrainians, 3 went to Poland, over 3 million went to Poland. So my city took in, you know, over 100,000 within 2 weeks. Warsaw and Krakow took 200,000 or 300,000. I mean, it's just quite amazing.
Reverend Bem is a former refugee lawyer, and his passion for this cause is a personal one.
I think when it really hit home was my nana was a refugee during World War II, and she was kicked out of Warsaw, forced to flee her house by the German Nazi army with my mom, who was 1 year old. And so I was watching one of these TV programs, and I saw this old woman in Ukraine, and she quoted verbatim my nana. And she said, "They made me leave my house. For what? Who gave them the right?" And that just hit really, really home. And so I asked my deacons in my congregation, I said, could we do a collection for Ukraine? And my church is just wonderful, and they said yes. And I thought, you know, if we can get like $1,000, that would be great. So we got 5. And then I posted on the Residents of Marlborough Facebook group, and people were wonderful. So by the end of the week, we had, I think, over $9,000 or $12,000. And donations started pouring in, and our denomination was doing a general collection, but I knew of churches in Poland that were actually taking in refugees and, you know, taking them into the parish halls, into old manses. And people just, you know, slept on bunk beds. People were opening old parish houses. People were renovating places just to take in the refugees. And so I said, well, why don't I just try to ask some of my yearly friends and some of my congregational friends? And I did, and they were wonderful. And then our denomination, our conference, our kind of local diocese, if you're Catholic, so to speak. So it published a blog post that I wrote about it. And then just donations started pouring in. So I went from 5,000, then we had 9, then we had 15 from Marlborough. And then one church, one church just sent in like, oh, we're going to do a collection for you. And, you know, we think it's going to be at least $2,000. And then they emailed us like, oh, we're sending in 15,000. But I also had this delightful pastor send us like the widow's mite. He's like, we're a very small church. You can see by the handwriting that the pastor is somewhat aged. He said, we're sending what we can, and it's $500.
Pastor Bem traveled to Poland. And in addition to visiting his parents, he met some of the refugees firsthand.
That was interesting. It was very intense. I was singing very loudly in church in my home congregation, very loudly. Not necessarily on key. I want to be very clear. And this lady was there, one of the refugees the congregation was hosting. I figured she was probably one of them. And we had a delightful conversation, but she arrived in Poland, and the very next day her son was killed fighting the Russians.
They have now raised over $143,000, and this money is being used in a variety of ways.
So we decided early on to kind of ship it to the Lutheran Diakonia, which is a big organization. The Lutheran Church is the largest church, Protestant church in Poland. My Polish Reformed Church is very old, but very small. Frozen chosen. So they know what the needs are. So part of it went to, and is going to go to shipments to medical supplies in Ukraine. They have a sister church in Ukraine. And so in the early months, what they were doing, they would take a van to the border or even to the western part of Ukraine. They would drop the supplies and they'd take people whom the congregations there prepared and take them back. We gave them, because, you know, all these places they took them in very often, you know, they had like some small guest houses, but there were no washers, there were no kitchenettes. So we said, in order for them, because we know these people are going to stay there long term. I don't think they know that, but we do. And so we said, well, use it to make them as comfortable, as independent as possible. But for example, it goes to a daycare program we just in Poznań in the Lutheran Church. So it's going to be like a day drop-in care for youth and young adults. So they'll be able to have psychological help, also help with Polish, because they're both Slavic languages. We use different alphabets, and they're not that close. Even I was surprised how. I mean, I can understand some, but I thought I would be able to understand more. So a daycare center, one congregation has renovated these two buildings, so these two women who are seamstresses can open up a business there. And they also, on the other side of a building that they're just repainting because it was stood empty, they're repainting on the inside. Is going to be a daycare, so these Ukrainian and Polish women can have a daycare to leave their children, because they have nowhere, they won't become independent if they have to take care of their children. But daycare, even in Poland, is rare. So they're opening a mixed daycare so the kids can learn Polish and Ukrainian, and the mothers can be, find some for a job opportunity or open up seamstresses. One congregation, and just to give you the scale, one is around 30 members. It hosts 15 people. Yeah, so they have like a small kitchenette, so they're kind of renovating it, and so it's like a proper kitchen that there are 3 families there, so these 3 families can have a kitchen space and a proper fridge and a proper washer. There's a refuge, like a shelter for women and children in Krakow. That pastor in that congregation is fantastic. It's one of the oldest congregations in Poland, Protestant, going back to 1560s. And they opened up and they turned it into this like day care for this shelter for women and children. Just fantastic. I met the women there. They're just great, and they cook and they're looking for jobs and it's a safe place for them to stay, and it's really at a good place. And then, as unsexy as it sounds, we also gave them for electric bills and for heating bills, because they have gone up more than in the United States. But also, as I was leaving, Russia turned off gas. So the prices of gas, we all know, are just going to skyrocket. And, again, a lot of people who took in the refugees because they thought it was going to be a week or two, and it's a lovely gesture, are now saying, well, we can't continue like this. Whereas these congregations want to be there in the long term. But that means that, these people have a roof over their head, and it's dry and it's heated. And again, we left for psychological care, for Polish languages, for job skills, for medical. We said, whatever you need to do, use.
The church is very grateful for all of the donations, and you can still contribute to this worthy cause.
And if I can just say, I just do want to thank everyone who helped make this happen. And if you still want to contribute, send us a check to First Church in Marlborough, write Ukrainian Relief. But I want to say thank you to everyone who helped and who opened their heart for whatever reason, religious, non-religious, humanitarian. Thank you. This is our success and our humanity and our kind of sign of hope in this world, so to speak. So thank you.